So Martin, excuse me, Jill Bullen mentioned the mental well-being strategy in the and said you'd managed to put in a few hooks in there about dark skies. So again, that was greatly appreciated. Um, and actually, I've lined up a few interesting webinars coming up throughout the year. So we've got an update on what's happening in Swansea. So Fran Rolfe and Penny from Swansea will be presenting on that next month. Then NRW is producing some really interesting uh, infographics, visualizations for urban green infrastructure, and my colleague Naomi Davis has been involved with that. So she'll be doing a presentation on that in July. Then we'll have a break for the summer. And then in the autumn, we've got a webinar on dark skies. And we've also got another one where I've managed to get the person responsible for the greening of Paris, which was all done around the Olympics, to give a presentation to us. So there, that will be coming along in October. So hopefully we've got an interesting series of webinars for people to come into. So come on, somebody challenge me about some of the things I said in that presentation. Marie, I think your microphone's on mute. Still can't hear you. You can save the day. Type your question into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer it. And I'm intrigued to know who RO0152 is, because you dialed in right at the start of this.
Image.
Hi, Robin. How you doing?
Habitat.
Oh, I can hear words. That wasn't Marie, was it by any chance? No worries.
Which I found, but it's not quite. I'd like to confirm the.
I can hear somebody whistling in the background, so I don't know who that is. Perhaps you could mute mute your microphone. Maybe it's Gemma. If you could mute your microphone if you're not asking a question there. Brilliant. So in the chat, then Liz from Llais Goedwig has posted a link to opla.eu, which apparently contains some case studies for nature-based solutions. So I'll definitely be taking a look at that. Yes, so Marie's raised the issue of continuing to support community groups to maintain urban green infrastructure, and saying that people move or simply lose interest. So if we're going to rely on people to look after urban green infrastructure, then we have to acknowledge the characteristics of voluntary groups. For years, I was the group's development officer for the British Trust for Conservation Volunteers. So I started in my career supporting voluntary environmental groups. Some seemed to go forever, and others sort of bloomed and then faded away like a sunflower. And it was, with the data we had at the time, it was almost impossible to tell why that happened. But having a culture where leadership was shared was one of the things that did seem to guarantee the longevity of a group. But also having support from an officer, like BTCV in those days had an officer in every county in the United Kingdom who would go out from time to time and work with these groups and help them to realize that they were loved and cared for, and that people appreciated what they did. So if we are going to go more to a model of community engagement in the management of urban green infrastructure, then we have to put resources in to to supporting those groups. and to you know devote money to that in order to um, well in order to move money from um, managing places ourselves to facilitating community groups to do that. And if you are careful about how you do that, it can be very rewarding. I will flag up the elephant in the room, and that is on many of our most challenged estates and challenged urban areas. People are really struggling. They may have to have two or three jobs just to manage their household. Some people have got uh, physical and mental disabilities which prevent them from working and place massive challenges on the way that they interact with society. And these are often the places where we most need our urban green infrastructures to be managed. So perhaps we need a mixed model where in the most affluent areas, where people are more likely to have the spare time and capacity to volunteer, where we look more to community groups to do that. And in the more challenged areas, we still work with communities to empower them to look after their green spaces, but we put a significant amount of resource into people to support them, to support those communities. And we look upon it more as a way of helping people with the challenges that they face every day, and not so much as just managing urban green infrastructure. Right. So Gemma, you've put in some really interesting comments in the chat. Uh, would you like to talk us through that?
No, not particularly. I would just random thoughts following on from what you were saying, just on the difficulty in recruiting and keeping volunteers. And just when you mentioned officer support, it just really hit home that yeah, that's I think the missing link in so many groups, having somebody to coordinate things and somebody. It's such a different skill set to be able to coordinate and recruit and motivate volunteers. Often you
Mm,
have people with different practical skills and people wanting to help out, but
yeah,
it's very difficult to bring things together. And I think the role of the support officer is neglected. We're potentially missing out on a lot of volunteer hours just because there's not that link.
absolutely. And this is this is dredging up skills that I developed 30 or 40 years ago, and making me think that maybe I should get somebody who's a bit more up to date to talk about this, um, because it is a real skill set. And as I say, in some areas where you've got, I mean, let's take Cardiff Conservation Volunteers. They've been going since before I got into this business, and they keep going. They've managed to propagate skills down through the generations. They're a machine. If you want countryside management done, Cardiff Conservation Volunteers are the people that you would go to. Whereas in some of the more challenged housing estates that I've worked on, um, you've got to flip the whole thing on its head and go, well, we'll have a professional management crew that will come in and do the difficult stuff, the regular stuff that needs doing, and we will use management and maintenance of community gardens as a therapeutic activity, and we'll bring in all the knowledge that we need to do that, so that people are contributing. Definitely they're making an impact, but that impact is as a very welcome byproduct from the therapeutic activities that they're undertaking. So I think we have to think about things differently, and we have to have not just nuances but different approaches in different areas for different things. And if anybody knows of somebody who's currently working in the volunteering sphere and who can talk about this with a bit more authority than my 40-year-old expertise, put them in touch with me and I'll see if we can get them to do a webinar. And Marie's made some interesting points about the need to work with voluntary groups on their terms and in their time. And that's one of the things I found most exhausting, but also rewarding when I was a field officer for the British Trust for Conservation Volunteers all those years ago. Evening meetings. You finish a hard day in the office and then expect you to you know, to drive God knows how many miles to a freezing cold village hall and speak with the community. But it is incredibly rewarding. So, Liz, you've got your hand up. Unmute yourself and
Yeah, I don't think my is my camera going to work? Oh my goodness, that's me.
excellent.
Hi. Always a surprise to see yourself so early in the morning. I didn't want to labour the thing about communities, but but I will. Llys Goedwig have got a we've got a strategic volunteering grant from WCVA to work with councils across Wales to look at their not to audit by any means, but to actually work with cross-council departments to look at how those departments work with volunteers and what the volunteer offer is with the community. So, for example, a person like me might contact Powys County Council and say to the countryside team, I'd love to volunteer. How do I go about doing it? And then what is their response and what is the volunteer journey and how is that supported by the council? So we've got this money to support councils, and we've found it incredibly difficult to engage with any of the councils. We only have a target of 5 across Wales, and to be fair to Flintshire have been fantastic, and we've worked a little bit with the town councils, but the larger councils, because of pressures on time, and also because perhaps the volunteer offer isn't maybe to the standard that they want it to be, they don't reach out to us. Whereas, you know, we're there specifically to say, hey, look, we'll help if we can, we'll give you advice, or we'll share case studies, or we'll link you up with other councils. So sometimes it's just the of groups. On the opposite side, third sector organisations want to support council groups, but that link and that maybe that trust in third sector organisations is missing. You know, I don't purport to be an expert on green infrastructure at all, but I do know how to facilitate groups and how to support communities. So sometimes sometimes, Pete, it's a trust issue, and also there is a cost issue. And I fear that sometimes countryside departments, which it normally falls under, let's face it, who manage volunteers, probably think, I'm better off the devil I know than reaching out to people, because who knows how much time that's going to take. And I think sometimes there needs to be maybe a bit of negotiation throughout the sector about how we can all help each other, because the benefits are so important, not just for councils for saving money, but also for the communities in which in which the infrastructure evolves.
Absolutely, and it comes down to this thing of we've got to get away from thinking of communities as a cheap source of labour and thinking about partnerships. But I think we have to recognise that local authorities have been cut to the bone. A few years ago, somebody from one of the local authorities in Wales was saying to me, Pete, it's not just a question of only being able to deliver statutory services every day. I have to work out which laws I'm going to break by not being able to deliver statutory services because we just don't have the money. Hopefully we'll be able to turn that around with the more humane governments that we seem to have at the moment. But I don't think we can rely on that. I think it's only going to be by reaching out to local authorities and by that very, very patient relationship building, the thing that Marie describes in the chat and that you've described. It's only going to be through that very patient process of building relationships that we're going to be able to turn this around. In the old days, the countryside commission for Wales, as it was here, they'd provide a 3-year initial grant, which averaged out to about a 50% support for a post, which they would then taper over the subsequent 3 years. So you'd have a guarantee of a presence for somebody in volunteering for 6 years. These days, you're lucky if you get a grant for a year if you're in the third sector. So it's really difficult to guarantee that somebody's going to be there, and that can destroy trust with the local communities, because they see somebody come in for a few months and then go away again. And they're like, well, why should we bother to get engaged with these people? Because we're only just getting to know them, and they're only just starting to understand us, and then they're gone again. So yeah, it's going to take a very, very different mindset and very, very different approach to funding. But those of you that are engaged with this, stick with it. We need you more than ever. And I don't know if that is a good place to end this discussion. And just to say thanks to everybody for dialing in, and I hope you can join us at the next webinar, which will be in June, when we'll get an update on what's happening with all the amazing green infrastructure work in Swansea. So thanks very much for dialing in, everyone, and see you in about a month's time. Bye for now.